The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, greetings. Welcome to another presentation in this public service nation-building series, The Law and You. This is program number 891, and it is coming to you on Monday, the 5th of February, 2018. On this program, which will be an extended program, thanks to the management of SVG-TV, who responded to my request that they give me a longer time this evening. And the program is entitled Confusion in Parliament. Now, I have just poured water into my drinking glass. I tried to get it exactly halfway in the glass. And the first question I want to pose to you is this. Is this glass half full or is it half empty? It's at the halfway mark. So is it half full or is it half empty? Come back to that in a while, and perhaps I should take a little sip. Now, I had planned a different program for this evening. I had planned to read in its entirety an article published by Ms. Paula David, attorney at law, in the Searchlight newspaper of last Tuesday, January 30th. And the title of that article is On Misinformation, Outrage and Critical Thinking. And it is based on the saga involving the young lady, Miss Yogi Farrell. I was so impressed with what Miss David wrote that I said, and I called and asked her permission to read the whole article on my program, and she very graciously said, okay. But then other events have intervened, and I thought I must give some attention to what took place in Parliament last week, Monday and Wednesday. I was not there in Parliament, but I followed it from my home on television, and I would have got most of it. Plus, I read what the newspapers had to say, and in particular Eyewitness News, to fill in gaps that I would have missed. So I thought I would present a program from my perspective to assist Vincentians and others in understanding what took place and in forming a critical opinion as to what ought or ought not to have been. Now, as I said in the beginning, this is program number 891. The Law and You is in its 20th year. Come April, DV, The Law and You, if I'm still around, would be in its 21st year. So for 20 years, over 890 programs before this one, I have endeavored to provide some enlightenment to the general public on legal matters generally speaking, particularly where they have a political dimension. The topic I am about to speak on is one which has aroused strong passions. I know that because I have interacted with persons who feel strongly one way or the other, feel strongly one way or the other. I will do my best to be level, neutral, and to expound the law to you as I know it. Not saying I would have the last word, but you know me, you have listened to me these 20 years, and you know I will try my level best to be straight with you, as I've always been, and to give you my legal opinion on the legal and give you my political opinion on the politics of the situation. I want to take my time, which is why I kindly asked the management to give me extra time this evening, and they have kindly agreed to do so. Now, I just want to ask you in turn to pay as much attention as you possibly can to what I say. Because if you only get parts and bits and pieces of my exposition, you would not necessarily have got the entire picture. And you may go thinking I said one thing, and that might not have been accurate. So I hope you will be able to give me some attention. As I speak now, we are taping the program a bit late. The time has now just gone past 4 o'clock. I had hoped to have been in Parliament to witness the presentation of the Honorable Camilo Gonsalves' first budget, but we're running late on the program this afternoon, so I wouldn't make it to Parliament. But by the time you are listening this, hopefully the proceedings in Parliament this afternoon would have been adjourned to tomorrow. And I'm not clashing, I hope, with the residue of the budget presentation. Now, I have spread out around me the legal materials that I'll be quoting from, and I'll be doing extensive quotation. I'm not going to tell you the law is A or B, I'm going to read it for you. Because I said this is a topic which has aroused enormous controversy in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and those who do not know the legal principles might have been easily led astray by propaganda from one side or the other. Let me begin with what transpired in the House on Monday. And I'm speaking from what I saw on television. Unfortunately, the TV camera tended to focus on one scene for a long time, so one did not get the feel, as one would have liked, of the reaction of everybody else in the house. But thank the TV personnel for bringing us live coverage. Well, as I looked at what transpired in the House, and it was the first day featuring the presentation of the estimates for the first time by the new Minister of Finance. The clerk went through the order paper And when she came to statements from ministers, she called the topic and then moved on because the Prime Minister's benches indicated that there were no ministerial statements. Whereupon the Leader of the Opposition got up and said he was surprised that there was no statement from the Honorable Camilo Gonsalves. And there followed an exchange between the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Dr. Friday, and the Honorable Speaker. Dr. Friday was endeavoring to get the Speaker to allow him to make a statement, but the Speaker overruled him and challenged him to point out the point of order that formed the basis of his request to be allowed to make a statement. And eventually the Speaker disallowed the request, whereupon Dr. Friday took out what appeared to be an envelope and said he had a motion of no confidence in the government and he was going to hand it to the Speaker, which he did, put it on the Speaker's desk. And then all the members of the opposition walked out. Thereafter, the House, after some transaction, broke for a break for members' convenience. And when the House came back, the Prime Minister said because of certain developments which had taken place during the break, that the debate on the estimates would continue on Wednesday morning. And he indicated that the government side had one substantive speaker, the Honorable Senator Julian Francis, and that after him, the Honorable Minister of Finance, Mr. Camilo Gonsalves, would wind up the debate on the estimates, and then immediately thereafter, they would deal with the motion of no confidence. That is what I can recall took place on Monday. Wednesday, I listened with bated breath and followed the proceedings which unfolded. Now, one of the factors which I found noteworthy is that when the Honorable Leader of the Opposition said he was surprised that no statement had been forthcoming from Honorable Camilo Gonsalves, I was not surprised, but I took a note of that. But when the members of Parliament walked out, I was surprised at that, because I anticipated that there would be questions on the order paper directed at Honorable Camilo Gonsalves. But how could the opposition walk out of Parliament leaving unanswered questions? And then it turned out that, according to what the Speaker announced, there were 10 questions which had been tabled beforehand by the opposition. And I subsequently inquired and was told that not one of those questions was directed at the Honorable Camilo Gonsalves. And I found that strange, because there was some agitation directed at the Honorable Camilo Gonsalves by the opposition, agitating that he ought to make a statement but not one of them tabled the question to him. But I know that this is politics, and you sometimes don't discern what the strategies are at the moment. But the question that lingered with me is, how come they walked out on the ground that he didn't make a statement, and none of them had thought of filing one question to him, demanding a statement of whatever. Mind you, I'm not saying that I go along with this question of his having to make a statement, because from what I read in that saga, no allegation was made against him touching and concerning the discharge of his responsibilities as a minister. But not dwelling on that. So the opposition walked out intending not to debate the estimates. Now, walking out of Parliament is nothing new for the NDP opposition. In fact, about 2 years ago, the government had brought a bill seeking to penalize opposition boycotts by monetary fines. I, on this program, The Law and You, spoke against that bill, and I advised the government that they should not go through with the bill, even though I didn't want to condone the opposition walkout, but I saw too many difficulties with trying to implement that, and I pleaded with the government not to go through with that bill, and I'm very happy to see that the government did not bring back the bill to Parliament. And I would like to think they heeded my advice, and that was that. But I am not one for opposition walking out, because you are elected to Parliament. That is, when you campaign, you beg people to send you to Parliament. And therefore, when you get the opportunity to come to Parliament, or in the case of senators, you are appointed by the leader of the opposition to Parliament, then that is where you are supposed to go. So to stay away from Parliament means that you are not doing the people's business. And it hurt me on Monday, honestly, because the most important parliamentary function for an opposition is to debate the estimates and the budget and present an alternative viewpoint to the nation. Explain to the nation why you think the government is getting it wrong, they're not doing the proper things, and so on. The opposition is supposed to be the people's watchdogs. And I don't use that watchdogs in any derogative sense, just as a colloquial expression. So when they leave Parliament without doing their duty, I feel disappointed. And honestly, I was looking forward to hearing the Honorable Anim Eustace. He's a man for whom I have very high regard. You all would have heard me a few programs ago saying that one of the problems with the tribalism we have is that a person with his qualifications in economics is wasted in the opposition, because our Constitution doesn't really provide meaningful responsibilities for the opposition. You've heard me, you're probably fed up hearing me talk about this winner-takes-all scenario, where you win election and you have all the power, the opposition has no power. So I was really disappointed that I didn't hear Mr. Eustace. Perhaps he would speak on the budget and I would get a chance to hear him, because according to the rules of the House, the person who speaks first for the opposition will have 4 hours tomorrow morning to reply to the budget. So I'm expecting that he would speak first, being the person with responsibility for finances in the opposition, so that we'll get the chance to hear him deliver himself for 4 hours in the budget tomorrow. So that was last Monday. Wednesday morning, Honorable Senator Julian Francis presented his proposals, mainly dealing with the maintenance and the rebuilding of roads, and it was quite fascinating. He called the names of some roads I hadn't even heard about in my life. But I'm glad to see that the roads will be attended to. And when he was finished, the Honorable Camilo Gonzalez, Minister of Finance, wound up the debate on the estimates. The opposition were there, a vote was taken, and the government side voted in favor of the estimates. And then there ensued a fascinating 3-hour period, more than 3 hours, of back and forth between the Speaker, the Prime Minister, other members on the government side, the leader of the opposition, other members on the opposition side. I found it a fascinating discussion, but judging by the topic of tonight's Law and You, I found it confusing, so I call it confusion in Parliament. References were made to the standing orders, to Erskine May's treatise on parliamentary procedure, to the Constitution, and it is my hope that after you have listened to this program tonight, you will have a better idea as to precisely what was what. But the long and the short of it is that the Speaker disallowed a request from the Prime Minister not to debate the opposition motion. And having allowed the motion to go forward, the Speaker then entertained an amendment to the opposition motion, an amended motion, about which there has been a lot of quarrel. I have before me here the full text of the opposition motion and the text of the government amendment. Now, I am thankful to the newspaper for printing both motion and amendment side by side in the newspaper of Friday. Of course, the printing was extremely fine, and I am visually challenged. But one thing about the news, excuse me. The newspaper reported that the government amendment motion was not signed by the Honorable Seth Mackey. But the motion they printed in their newspaper has the Honorable Mackey's signature there. I mean, all the government elected representatives have signed, including Mr. Mackey. So perhaps the news ought to publish an apology to him for alleging he didn't sign when his signature is there. Granted, he didn't sign at the beginning of the line, but I am seeing the signature along with his name. Half full or half empty? My brothers and sisters, these two motions are opposite sides of the same coin. But don't take my word for it. Listen to me, read them. I will read first the opposition motion, then I will read the government motion, then I'll read both side by side, paragraph by paragraph, and show you that if you say this glass is half full and others say it's half empty, both of you will be correct. And if you say that one of these is a motion of no confidence and the other is a motion of confidence, you would be correct. But, and this is the point I want to make, in my view, there was nothing in either of these motions that both the opposition and the government could not have debated what they came to debate without changing a word, except when it came to the voting. Listen to the motion. Notice of motion of no confidence in the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Whereas the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines has been failing the people miserably in providing a satisfactory quality of life. And whereas the priorities of the government in its use of taxpayers' money have produced totally inadequate health services and basic maintenance of roads. And whereas the collapse of the economy has deprived our youth of hope and employment opportunities, and whereas a climate of fear through intimidation at all levels of Vincentian society has become widespread due to the manifest abuse of the powers of the state and its institutions, which are often employed as weapons against citizens to serve the agenda of government officials, their family members, and associates. And whereas there has been a breakdown in law and order as demonstrated by the incidents of rampant crime and the failure of the various agencies of law enforcement to protect the more vulnerable members of society, including the elderly, women, and young persons, be it resolved that this Honorable House declares no confidence in this Unity Labour Party government of Prime Minister Dr. Honorable Ralph Gonsalves. Signed by Honorable Godwin Friday, Honorable Anna Mustas, Honorable Roland Matthews, Honorable Terence Olivier, Honorable Sinclair Leacock, Honorable Daniel Cummings, Honorable Nigel Stevenson. Has no date, but it was handed to the Speaker on the 29th of January. Okay, this was the government's amendment called Amendment to Motion of Confidence, bracket, motion exempted from notice on the Standing Orders 25A. This is what the government said. Whereas the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines has succeeded in providing a markedly improved quality of life for the people as a whole, and whereas the priorities of the government and its use of taxpayers' money have produced vastly improved health services, education, housing, social safety nets, cultural and sporting facilities, and physical infrastructure, and whereas the stabilization and growth of the economy has provided our people, including the youth, with a sense of hope, enhanced possibilities and opportunities for job creation, And whereas our nation as a whole has been enjoying an unprecedented high level of political and civil rights, democracy, judicial independence, economic and press freedom, openness, transparency, and an absence of official corruption. And whereas the state administration, inclusive of the various agencies of law enforcement, has been a major bulwark in the fight against crime and violence and in the protection of the more vulnerable members of the society, including those who are poor and marginalized, especially from the ranks of the elderly, persons with disabilities, women and young persons. Be it resolved that this Honorable House express full confidence in this Unity Labour Party government of Prime Minister Dr. the Honorable Ralphie Gonsalves, signed by the Prime Minister Sir Louis, Minister Daniel, Minister Caesar, Minister Mackey, Minister Stevenson, Minister Camilla Gonsalves, Minister Sinclair Prince. So that the opposition, now, when you read a motion or resolution, the whereases are not as important as the be it resolved. The whereases are called recitals. And you read legal documents, you have a whole string of whereas, so and so, whereas. You could skim those, but what is important is when it comes down to be it resolved. Let me now read them to you side by side. Each has 5 paragraphs of recitals. Opposition, paragraph 1. Whereas the government of St. Vincent and Grenadines has been failing the people miserably in providing a satisfactory quality of life. Government response. Whereas the government of St. Vincent and Grenadines has succeeded in providing a markedly improved quality of life for the people as a whole. 2. Opposition. And whereas the priorities of the government in its use of taxpayers' money have produced totally inadequate health services and basic maintenance of roads. Government response in 2. And whereas the priorities of the government in its use of taxpayers' money have produced vastly improved health services, education, housing, social safety nets, cultural and sporting facilities, and physical infrastructure. Opposition, paragraph 3. And whereas the collapse of the economy has deprived our youth of hope and employment opportunities, government responds to that. And whereas the stabilization and growth of the economy has provided our people, including the youth, with a sense of hope, enhanced possibilities and opportunities for job creation. Opposition, paragraph 4. And whereas the climate of fear through intimidation at all levels of incensed society has become widespread due to the manifest abuse of the powers of the state and its institutions, which are often employed as weapons against citizens to serve the agenda of government officials, their family members and associates. Government responds to that. And whereas our nation as a whole has been enjoying an unprecedented high level of political and civil rights, democracy, judicial independence, economic and press freedom, openness, transparency, and an absence of official corruption. Opposition, paragraph 5. And whereas there has been a breakdown in law and orders demonstrated by the incidents of rampant crime and the failure of the various agencies of law enforcement to protect the more vulnerable members of society, including the elderly, women and young persons, government response. And whereas the state administration, inclusive of the various agencies of law enforcement, has been a major bulwark in the fight against crime and violence and in the protection of the more vulnerable members of the society, including those who are poor and marginalized, especially from the ranks of the elderly, persons with disabilities, women and young persons. Be it resolved. This is the opposition resolution. Be it resolved that this Honorable House declares no confidence in this Unity Labour Party government of Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, and the government motion, be it resolved that this Honorable House express full confidence in this Unity Labour Party government of Prime Minister Dr. the Honorable Ralph E. Gonsalves. Now, when the question of the amendment came up, some members on the opposition side said that what the government produced as an amendment was a totally different motion, and it was not really an amendment. Well, I beg to differ. Because an amendment hasn't got to follow the exact wording, but it has to follow the sentiment of the challenge. But you would expect that on a no confidence motion, the opposition would be saying that the House has no confidence in the government. You would expect the government to be saying that the House has full confidence in the government. Half full and half empty. What is an amendment? I turn first to our standing orders of the House of Assembly. Standing Order 32.1 says, where any motion is under consideration in the House or in a committee thereof, an amendment may be proposed to the motion if it is relevant thereto. 2. An amendment may be proposed to any such amendment if it is relevant thereto. What is called the Parliamentary Bible, Erskine May's treatise on parliamentary procedure, says of amendment. The object of an amendment, I'm reading from page 395 of the 20th edition, my own book. The object of an amendment may be either to modify a question in such a way as to increase its acceptability, or to present to the House a different proposition as an alternative to the original question. And those of us in the legal system would be quite aware of the concept of an amendment. An amendment can take various forms, but where a government is facing a motion of no confidence, it is a common technique that governments use all over the world of proposing an amendment to the opposition no confidence motion to express confidence in the government. The question arose as to whether the Speaker should have permitted the Prime Minister to bring his amending motion. And the Speaker allowed the amendment. Subsequently, I understand, because I am not on Facebook, I didn't read it myself, but I understand the Speaker subsequently wrote that he was mistaken in allowing the government to amend the motion. But I want to say, I agreed with the original ruling of the Speaker. He was not mistaken at all, because proposing an amendment to an opposition no confidence motion is routine. And where the opposition says the House has no confidence in the government's amendment usually says, yes, the House has full confidence in the government. But I want to introduce a point which I haven't heard anybody talk about yet. Do you know that the debate on the estimates and subsequently the budget debate are in fact two debates of confidence or no confidence in a government. Our Constitution makes it a must for the government to come to Parliament every year to propose estimates and to propose an appropriation bill, which we popularly call the budget. Our Constitution, Section 69, subsection 3, says, "No money shall be withdrawn from any public fund other than the consolidated fund, unless the issue of those monies has been authorized by or under any law." And Section 70 of our Constitution says this: "The minister for the time being responsible for finance shall cause to be prepared and laid before the House before or not later than 30 days after the commencement of each financial year estimates of the revenues and expenditure of St. Vincent and the Grenadines for that financial year." So to bring the estimates is a constitutional mandatory provision which all governments have to comply with. Subsection 2 says, when the estimates of expenditure have been approved by the House, I left out some words in brackets, not German, a bill known as an appropriation bill shall be introduced in the House, providing for the issue from the consolidated fund of the sums necessary to meet that expenditure and the appropriation of those sums under separate votes for the several services required to the purposes specified therein. So the Constitution is saying every year you have to bring the estimates, have them passed in the House, followed by an appropriation bill called a budget, and have that passed in the House as well. And according to parliamentary tradition, any government that loses a vote on the estimates or on the appropriation bill has to resign, because the vote on the appropriation bill and the vote on the estimates are regarded as tests as to whether the government commands the support of a majority of the House of Assembly. So that when on Monday last week the estimates were being debated, that was a debate of confidence in the government, and had the opposition debated it, they no doubt would have debated it as a debate of no confidence in the government, because the estimates and the budget are critical factors to indicate whether a government has a majority or not, which a no confidence motion is seeking to say the government has lost its majority in the House. So that to bring a no confidence motion on the same day that the estimates are down for debate is to be duplicating the attacks on the government, because when an opposition attacks the appropriation bill and the estimates, it is saying that this government has lost credibility, has lost its majority. So that the Speaker would have been quite correct to allow Dr. Gonsalves to move his motion that the opposition no confidence motion should have been put aside or postponed or whatever, because really and truly the no confidence motion duplicated the opposition attacks on the estimates. Let me remind you of the topics in the first recitals of the opposition motion. They attacked the use of taxpayers' money. They attacked inadequate health services. They attacked basic maintenance of roads. They alleged that the economy had collapsed. So the same things they were coming to debate in their no confidence motion were the same things that the estimates were designed to speak to. And therefore, it would have been quite in order for the Speaker to rule that, listen, coming in the week of the estimates to be followed by the budget debate, a no confidence motion duplicates the attacks, because the same things the opposition could attack the government about in the debate on the estimates and in the appropriation bill are the same things in their motion. Now I want to show you that in our rules, that motion of no confidence was, in my humble opinion, out of order for another violation. Standing Order 38 of our standing orders provides, it shall be out of order to anticipate a bill by discussion upon a motion dealing with the subject matter of that bill. So the motion dealt with the subject matter of the appropriation bill and the estimates, and therefore violated, in my view, Standing Order 38. So that had the opposition debated their no confidence motion, which they had the opportunity to do, because the debate on the amendment would necessarily entail the same sort of attacks by the opposition that they must have prepared when they prepared their presentations on the motion of no confidence. So I'm saying they should have debated their no confidence motion using the same attacks when they got up to speak on the government amendment. Now, the question as to whether the Speaker was right or wrong in his earlier ruling, when he ruled against Dr. Gonsalves' suggestion that the opposition motion should not be presented, is one that I am acquainted with, because these standing orders, number 16 of 1989, were done under my chairmanship when I was Attorney General. the Prime Minister set up a committee of Parliament, which he graciously invited me to chair, to revise all the standing orders. And we went through them over a period of time, and eventually on the 23rd of March 1989, we came to Parliament and had these standing orders approved. There is hardly anything in these standing orders with which I am not acquainted. And I don't say so to boast, but if you work on something, you must have an idea what is in it. The Constitution has provided for no confidence motions in section 47. 47.2 says, if notice in writing is given to the Speaker signed by not less than 3 representatives of a motion of no confidence in the government, the Speaker shall, 1, if the House is then sitting or has been summoned to meet within 5 days, cause the motion to be considered by the House within 7 days of the motion, of the notice. Well, the House was sitting. But some people have argued that the word considered there means you have to debate it. Can't be so. To consider means to bring it to the attention of the House, for the House to decide what to do with it. Other provisions below that speak to disposing and debating, debate and dispose. But there is nothing in 47.2a which makes it mandatory that a motion of no confidence must be debated. No. In my respectful opinion, not where it comes on the very day in which you're debating the estimates, which is a higher form of no confidence motion. Because the rules of the House provide opportunities to sift motions when they come before. A motion is not automatically debated. It has to be sifted for relevance, for anticipation, and matters like that kind. So that, to sum up, I disagree with my good friend, Brother Jomo Thomas, the learned speaker, when he ruled that you had to debate the bill, the motion. But I agreed with him when he ruled that the opposition could file an amendment, and you debate that first in accordance with the rules. His subsequent recanting of that position, well, anybody has the right to say, look, I think I was wrong. But with respect to my good brother Jomo Thomas, he was correct in that second ruling. So in my respectful opinion, my brothers and sisters, what happened last week was practically a storm in a teacup. Because when the opposition get to debate the budget, they will have the opportunity to bring down the government if they have a majority, which is what the motion of no confidence purported to do. But if the government survives the budget, it would show that the motion of no confidence was bogus. And if you file a motion of no confidence and you don't know that somebody on the government side is planning to cross, you are just trying a thing. It's not a genuine motion where you honestly feel that you have a chance to bring the government down because they have lost the majority. And if there is nothing to indicate to an opposition that the government is likely to lose its majority, they could not be justified in bringing a motion of no confidence to be debated at the same time with the estimates and the appropriation bill. You see, no confidence means that the government has lost its elected majority. You know, when the leader of the opposition, I was looking on television, put that letter on the speaker's desk and says he has a motion of no confidence, I figure, boy, who on the government side going to cross the floor? I figure, well, they must have had discussions and somebody on the government side must have indicated to them that they plan to cross the floor. The way that Joshua did in August 1974, when he and Mammy crossed the floor and brought down the Mitchell-Joshua Alliance government. And you had elections subsequently in December 1974, resulting in the formation of a Labour PPP government with Mr. Mitchell alone in opposition. So that when you table a motion of no confidence, knowing full well that nobody on the government side has said they're going to come across to support you, you're just trying a thing, you're trying a strokes, to use common parlance. And you cannot be heard to complain if the Prime Minister gets up and tells the Speaker that the House decided not to proceed with that. And you can't say it's undemocratic. Democracy is the rule of the majority. That's what democracy is about. And once a government has an elected majority, they're entitled to administer the affairs of a country until their term is finished, or until they prematurely feel like having an early dissolution. It's not that I've abandoned the NDP. I'm still a card-carrying member of the New Democratic Party. But my brethren must get their strategy and their tactics right. They mustn't be misled by people who have no idea of political strategizing. So, my brothers and sisters, I hope you now have a clearer understanding of what went on. It's not that the government tried to do anything undemocratic. The learning I am trying to impart to you, I can glean it from Dr. Francis Alexis's book, Changing Caribbean Constitutions. And I understand that he is about to send a learned opinion for us here in St. Vincent and Grenadines. So once again, I want to thank SVG-TV for giving me the extra time. Hope that you have found it useful and beneficial. And I have spoken to you from the depths of my knowledge, experience, and out of all sincerity. That is all from this program of The Law New, program 891. I look forward to being of further service to you next week, Monday DV, for another presentation in this public service nation building series, The Law and You. May the good Lord continue to bless us all. Thank you.
The Law and You. A look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You. Presented by lawyer panel R. Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.